be going live.
And if you don't have a link to the Twitch page, there is one in the Discord now.
Okay, but we will stay. Everything is done in this voice chat, right? I don't need to
Yes,
be
it's
on
just
on
if you want to
Twitch.
keep an eye on the chat if anyone comes in with questions for you.
Yeah, I saw the link on the Discord channel. Yeah.
Where are you? All right, we are apparently online.
Hooray.
All right. So, any commercials of note this time?
No, just MetaQuest and LL Bean again.
Mm.
All right.
Everybody seems to be fine. Does I guess want to say a couple of words so we can double check his levels?
Good. Are you
Hello,
still
hello.
there?
One check.
There we go.
Okay.
And then we wait
All right.
the subsequent 4 seconds for it to route around the Twitch server.
All right, everything seems to be fine.
Cool.
All right. Let us
Nice.
venture forth.
Alright. Speed llama can go away for a second. Alright. Gulix, you have something for the top?
Sure.
Let me do one quick check. Come on. Default com. Default device, good. And then undo that. Alright. You may count down when ready.
Okay, we can begin in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Can't find caffeine? Try waking up with Fragments of Silicon.
All right. Welcome to another installment of the Fragments of Silicon Daylight interviews. Joining us this week is Chaosmonger of Chaosmonger Studio.
So, hello everybody.
Hello. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm actually on holidays, so everything is great. I took a little vacation after releasing my last game, so everything is nice and smooth so far.
That's good to hear. Smoothness is always appreciated, especially in this industry.
Yeah.
But we'll probably get into that a little later. Right now, how we like to start the interview proper is we like to get to know the people behind the studio, the game, and all of that sort of business. And we do this by asking this particular question: what got you interested in video games, both on a personal and a professional level?
So, actually, I'm formerly a film director. I have my own company, like Chaosmonger Studio, started like more than 20 years ago, actually, doing movies. and all sort of video. So from documentaries to music videos, short films, and again exploring different genre. So from science fiction, drama, comedies, web series, animation, you name it. And I started making games actually after one of my short film got some attention from the gaming community. And basically, I was running a Kickstarter for this animated short film, which is called Robot Will Protect You. And it's like an 11 minutes uh, cyberpunk sort of animated film, but with some sweetness in it. So my idea was to blend like Blade Runner atmospheres with the like sweetness of the Studio Ghibli, like Miyazaki
Hmm.
vibe. And while I was running the Kickstarter for that project, I started hearing many people saying, "Hey, but why don't you make a game with these settings, this art style, and these characters?" And I said, "Okay, why not?" So I set like a stretch goal to that campaign that if I was going, way above the main goal for the short film, I could have started developing the game. And I reached that stretch goal. So right after I finished the short film, I started developing the game, which later became Encodia, which is my first game, and so far actually still my best-selling game. And I also ran a brand new Kickstarter campaign specifically for Encodia for the game, and then it went also kind of well, and so I basically started that way my career in the game industry. Actually, without any previous knowledge, I started to learn how to code like on my own, just watching tutorials online and things like that. And Encodia is actually a point-and-click adventure game. So it's like very narrative and very visual. So in a way, the process of moving from the film industry or from the animation industry to the game one wasn't that hard. I mean, I had already like the assets because the game it has a totally different story, but the setting, the characters, some of the characters at least were the same of the short film. I just had to optimize the poly count to not make it too heavy, and of course all the coding part, which was the real deal because I didn't have any experience with that. But I started it, and like in a couple of years since I started, I released it. Basically, I finished the short film in December 2018. I started the developing of the game in December 2019, and then I released the Concordia. In January 2019, and in January 2021, I released Encodia. So that's how I started, basically.
Hmm. Um, so quite a bit to unpack there. Um, it's like your journey is a fairly uncommon one, but I think we've had that kind of crossover appear on our program before. Someone from other media jumping into video games. Um, that being said, do you still work in other mediums these days, or are you solely on the video game train?
I kept working on both, even though games took over somehow. Let's say that they are taking most of my time, or maybe like 60-70% of my time are for games. The other 30-40%, I'm still into the movie industry. I finished a feature documentary this year, and I'm working on a secret feature animation at the moment. So I kept working on both fields, even though gaming is a bit more time consuming for now.
Right. I mean, That doesn't surprise me in the least, given how much more intensive it is to build video games versus movies or even animation. That's not to deride or anything. It's just um, the resources that require creating an actual product in terms of video game is actually a lot more because it's a interactable medium, among other things. But it seems like enjoy developing video games well enough to stick with it. Has it gotten easier with time and experience?
Yes, of course. By the way, I'm noticing someone is having troubles to jumping. There is also the. I'm looking the live on Twitch, and if there is a problem of jumping up, you can grab to a ball whoever is playing now.
Yeah,
If you hold
I'm just
the
kind of
right
messing
bumper,
around right now, but yeah.
yes. And if you
Uh,
want, if you go to the options, you can have the automatic wall
While playing,
wall
yeah.
cling. Yeah. Anyway, it's um, of course, I hope at least I got better with time for all the coding part or making somehow life easier for the players. Because the first games were, coming from a different media, it was kind of hard really to get into the user experience and how they, perceive the game and how hard it is to please everybody, and even with Speedolama, which is now my latest game. Even if I paid a lot of attention on every detail, I still see, some reviews or some people complaining about things. Sometimes
uh,
it's just because they are not even reading the tutorial or reading the controls or going into the options. But it's because the game industry is, how to say, very demanding and is a very saturated market. And then it's, despite you try to put a lot of attention and tell the player everything, it's very hard to reach a wide audience. So in a way, I think I got better with time, but at the same time, I'm still not perfect, and there is still a lot to learn in this user experience level.
um, I suppose another thing to note is the shifting genre. Um, because, as you mentioned, Encodia is a narrative heavy point and click adventure game. And Speedolama here is a roguelike run and gun uh, platformer, which are very far apart from each other. So,
Yes, I'd say they are kind of the opposite, and it's one of my, I would say, somehow a problem I have with myself, and this also happened in the movie career I had because I usually get bored very easily of what I do, and I don't like to keep the same genre or the same style. I always try to change and explore something, do a bit for because of boredom, and but also because for me, whatever part of my creative universe, it's always for me a matter of learning something new. And for instance, after Encodia, which is this heavy narrative, heavy point and click adventure game with a cyberpunk setting, I made Clanky Hero, which is a Metroidvania fantasy platformer with a lot of humor. Then I went back to the cyberpunk world. So I'm basically bouncing up between narrative cyberpunk things and colorful, funny platformers. in a way also to detach from that dark cyberpunk universe and not getting too much sucked into it. And I need always to change my setting, like my mind setting, to not get stuck into one single thing. So that's why I like to experiment with very different genre. Like for instance, Encodia also or Clunky Hero, they were more like this comic art style, so 2D comic art kind of, while Speedolama is like this retro arcade pixel art. So again, for me, it's always this experimenting with different techniques and visual style and so on.
That makes sense, and indeed, such an approach will have its give and take. Um, th- so, it's. I don't want to say it balances out, but it kind of makes sense that there would be different struggles in attempting something so wildly different from your previous efforts. Like, um, that being said, how long does it usually take to develop one of your games?
Sorry, I didn't hear the last part of the question.
Um, what? How long does it usually take to develop one of your games?
Yeah, well, the fact is, as I said earlier, I started in January 2019, so now it's like nearly 6 years I'm doing,
Mhm.
and I've released 5 games. So I would say the average is like 12 months, even though Encodia and Clunky Hero, my first 2 games, took more time, so like around 2 years each, even though at some point the development was overlapping between those 2 games. And the other 3 that I made after those first 2 games were somehow faster, also because I was, how to say, trying to experiment with something simple, to, just to try, new things. And so they were somehow lower budgets, lower resources. I still think they are well made, and they are not just how to say shovelware, but yeah, they took like 12 months on average. The other 3, while the first 2 were like 2 years. All of it overlapping because, as I said earlier, I um, I try to detach from something. So very often I start developing a new game, even though the previous one is not entirely done. This because I need to detach from it and see it with fresh eyes, maybe some months later. So there is always, it's not like I finish one game, then I start a new one, but the process is more, yeah, mixed.
Makes sense, and it's just also junctioning off that previous question. How much of a solo dev are you? Like, do you handle all aspects, or are there some things that are outsourced, like art or probably music? If I'd had to guess.
Yeah, exactly. I handle most of it. So if you have to take in consideration the hours spent to make those games, I would say that maybe 80% or even 90% is like my own work, from coding, level design, art direction. In Speedolama, I even made the sounds. And all the work in Unity, I work with Unity, is done by myself. I am the only one touching the game in Unity, so the writing, level design, everything is done there. But I outsource, of course, the music, the voice acting, the graphics, or at least some of the graphics, especially if it's about characters and animations of the characters. That I usually outsource, while maybe the backgrounds or the level design and so on, very often I do it myself.
Yeah, that's not a big surprise, as it mirrors many of the other game devs that we've had on the program. But like one of the biggest topics of conversation we usually have is game dev time. And honestly, uh, you're hitting a bit above par there. Given that like the average, like even the average indie game takes 2 to 3 years with even a small team behind it. But that's usually factoring in focus and intent and skill set as well. So I would say that you are progressing pretty impressively, all things considered. Um, anyway, so with all that aside, um, is Speedolama here exactly?
Yeah, Speedolama is basically a run and gun platformer. I started having the idea for it while I was playing a lot of retro arcade games
Mhm.
via an emulator, like called MAME
Oh
or
yeah.
MAME. I don't know how you pronounce it exactly. And it has these huge libraries of, old arcade games from the 80s and the 90s. So I was playing a
Mm,
bunch of those games, of course, like Metal Slug, Contra, and so on, and many other more. Like, actually, by the way, a few things about me is that I'm from 79, so I started my playing games mostly during the 80s and especially the 90s with
mhm.
a Commodore mostly. My first computer was a Commodore 16 actually, then a Commodore
Oh,
64, and then Amiga 600 and Amiga 1200. So I was, those sort of games, especially Amiga games of the early 90s, were like what I grew up with. I, I played console at my friends or like my cousins, but I never owned a console myself.
like
And I play mostly, yeah, on Commodore Amiga.
once
So
again,
Speedolama is,
yeah,
yeah,
that's
sorry.
not surprising given uh, your geography. Like a lot of Euro-based developers cut their teeth on Commodore, Amiga, what have you.
Yeah, I think it was very common. I mean, I'm originally from Italy. Now I live in Estonia. Uh, but yeah, it was pretty common, at least in that era, in the first half of the 90s. Then things moved also because Commodore failed and so on. But yeah, so in a way, Speedolama is inspired by all of that. So both by my own experience of the early 90s and by this retro arcade full immersion I did like a year and a half ago, more or less, when I started coming up with the idea for Speedolama. So while I was playing all those retro arcade games, I say, okay, I want to do something in that style. Uh, I want it to be in pixel art. I want to feel it like very arcade in the gameplay. So it's somehow a tribute to those games. But what I also wanted was to make it fresh in a way and very fast, especially at later stages after the player gets this speed upgrade. The game gets extremely fast, but also the player gets better by playing it. So everything it's super fast, but funny and you can handle it despite the extreme fast speed.
Right, that's a delicate balancing act. Um, just ask all of the Sonic wannabes from the '90s that really didn't understand how that's all worked. Like,
A lot of people forget that Sonic 1 could have been faster. They actually toned it down.
oh yeah. Like Sonic. Like some people complain that Sonic 1 doesn't go blazing fast after level 1, but that's a conversation in its own.
Oh yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I mean,
Sonic, of course, is another great reference,
I
especially
can
because it's cheap.
tell.
But it's not that like it's not even that fast if you think.
Oh yeah, no.
It could have been way faster. Yeah.
like, indeed, I gotta admit, it is a bit curious to see this particular mashup. As in, we've got a mascot type character here that's engaged in a run and gun platformer, whereas going back to the source material, this kind of design would have been much more focused about collecting items and going left to right and actually dumping, maybe dependent on the platformer.
Hmm.
Like,
Looks menacingly at Bionic Commando.
Bionic Commando is a special thing, but once again, that's a conversation for a different age. I'm talking more of like Bubsy.
Mm.
But to put the llama in Metal Slug confinement is something that I don't I don't recall being done in the 90s. So it
Yeah,
certainly
I think like the characters for which is now I was telling mostly about the so far about the style of the game, but about like the lore of the game or the little narrative that is there or why llama. Well, first of all, uh, as I say, since the references are those of the 90s, and we mentioned Sonic, and another game which I really love for the Amiga was Super Frog. I don't know if you know that. It's well, there
mm,
is this frog with a cape, and it's very fast. It was the answer of the Commodore Amiga to Sonic, because Super Frog is kind of fast game, at least fast for that age. And
I mean,
in a way, I like always this sort of fantasy animals world of the 90s. If you also think like Crash Bandicoot, it was pretty
right.
common back then to use, like uh, animal characters to get this sort of fantasy world. Now we lost it because I think games got a lot more serious than in the past. Also for the market, like now it feels like the players want like some sort of dark universe. If you exclude like Nintendo, which is very colorful usually, Nintendo
Hmm.
games, but otherwise like also if you think, I don't know, the Metroidvania of the latest years, like Hollow Knight, Blasphemous, and so on, they are all like looking dark and very dark. But so in a way, maybe it wasn't the best choice for the market to make something so colorful. But it was for me a tribute to those, games. And also, I always like the idea that it's very hard to tell if it's a llama or an alpaca.
Hmm.
It always, okay, is that a llama or is it an alpaca? And for me, it
I
was
mean, it's
funny to
mostly a
have a wall.
size thing, and that doesn't really scale well with small video game art.
Yeah, exactly. But in general, I like the idea of if you see a photo on the internet, if it's a llama or an alpaca. So I like the idea of the alpacas wanting to exterminate the llamas to be the only one, the only species. And therefore, there is this war between alpacas trying to kill the llamas, and you are one llama mercenary, one out of three actually llama to trying to destroy the alpaca army and save the world. So this is, yeah, just to mention the narrative behind it.
Honestly, it's a narrative yarn right out of the school of Jeff Minter. Being honest, um,
Yeah, I mean,
but um, in terms of its colorfulness, there's a place for that on in the market. This kind of,
Especially in this modern era, like
yeah,
a lot of people
like,
are since like last generation or the generation before that, people have been kind of getting tired of the dark, monochromatic, or like just deep browns we've had before, and colorful games starting to become in vogue again.
Yeah, it's a nuanced conversation. Like, you brought up the darkness of Metroidvania, but that's kind of endemic to the genre. Like, its biggest influences are Super Metroid and Symphony of the Night, which are two very grim, moody, brooding games.
And like Symphony of the Night was like Castlevania in general was,
yeah,
brought about by old monster films, which are in of themselves very dark, very moody.
like to a degree,
Yeah.
but once again, like what we got here is somewhere in the middle. Like, it's colorful, but it's also like rated T for teen. Like, it's not, oh, hey, look, it's cute characters put against ridiculously violent scenarios, which was popular about 20 years ago. Like, the era of Happy Tree Friends and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, it's hard to say. It's hard to say. Whether or not there's a entire market behind something that's this unique, but it is also, as you mentioned, like just in general, a very saturated market. Like,
No, I mean, I was just, of course, the market is unpredictable, and you can make a colorful game and have, sells a lot, and vice versa. Uh, what I was saying was that in general, if you think of those, like shooters or Metroidvania, pixel art platformer, many of them are in this sort of dark tone. Of course, not all of them, and of course, there is market for everyone, but yeah, in general, it's a very saturated market for indie games, especially if you try to make a pixelated platformer. But I wanted to give my personal tribute to the genre and my personal, how to say, love tribute to the early 90s arcade games in the genre. So yeah, this is
right,
this
right,
is it.
and of course, if we're talking about indie trends here, we do have to address the roguelike elements, because I don't think there's a trend bigger on the indie scene than roguelike light elements in a video game.
Yeah.
Was there a particular reason why you made this game procedurally generated?
Uh, Well, it's related, let's say, with the game mechanic, because basically, compared to a Metal Slug, for instance, Speedolama develops a lot also vertically, so you have a lot of jumping around, and is part of like a collectathon, so you need to collect the items before time expired, and in a way, having the procedurally generated maps, because actually the maps are created with a pool of rooms. So there are about 10, 12 rooms from which the map is generated. So it is the procedural part is the way all those rooms are connected to form the map. So, and this makes every run unique. Also to give, how to say, the player the need to explore hunting for the collectibles. Because if it was like a static fixed map, then each run would have been easier when the player knows already the map. But the way that, since the map is always different and new, gives more challenge to the player, and therefore the choice to make it procedurally generated.
I see. And are there any sort of like permanent upgrades in this title?
Yeah, after each game over or after each level completed, you go to a shop and where you can buy upgrades. The shop basically wants your money. It's those coins. You can get coins by killing the enemies, or at the end of each level, based on how many items you collect or how fast you collect them, you have those bonus coins. And with all those coins, you can get upgrades. The same happens after a game over. So, for instance, if at the beginning you are struggling to complete a level and you die, you can still buy the upgrades. So the next run you can, for instance, run faster, jump higher, shoot faster, having more health, and all those sort of upgrades. There are also upgrades about the how many items you can collect. Maybe you need to collect less with some upgrades, or you can walk or run with the map, which by default stops the player. So yeah, there are all those permanent upgrades that you can buy, and also you have actually 3 slots to equip them at the beginning. So if you have, I don't know, 6 upgrades, you have to choose 3, and you can choose them based on your strategy, or for instance, if it's a level with a boss, maybe you can change strategy and change which upgrade to use. But later in the game, those slots become 4, and at later stages, up to 5, because of course the number of the upgrades increase the more you continue and progress through the game.
Okay. And what about characters? It looked like you could select from a list of 3 here.
Yes, there are 3 characters. They have different stats. For instance, now on Twitch, I see is playing with Chris, which is the fastest one. Then we have Arnold, which is more strong in terms of health, for instance, but not that fast. And then we have Lizzie, which is the female character, and she shoots very fast and also have a good stat for jumping. So they have like a slight different percentage on stats. And of course, also based on the upgrades that you buy, then you can choose, for instance, one character to focus more on speed, the other more on health or jump, and so on.
Once again, that makes sense and is, I won't say pretty typical, like because I've seen it both ways, like where sometimes the characters do have different stats, and sometimes the characters are just aesthetically different, but they play the same.
Or it's just so close, you're basically just min-maxing for the point of min-maxing.
Yeah, actually, initially it was basically just like a skin at the very, very early stage. It was basically the same character, just with different aesthetic. And if you think like also Metal Slug, basically you choose characters, I mean, in the original Metal Slug, but they are actually exactly the same stat. But then after a while, I thought, okay, but I think it's cooler if those characters have actually different stats. So I changed that, giving them like a percentage, like a multiplier somehow, to change a bit the speed, health, and so on.
Right. And in terms of bosses, when you reach a boss level, is it always going to be the same boss, or is there a rotating field of bosses that you fight?
They are very different. We have bosses that are like, for instance, on land, like a tank. There is a couple of bosses that are flying, like airplanes and even some drones. One boss is like a submarine, so it's on water. So they are kind of different, and of course with different sort of attacks. I wouldn't say that they are extremely different, like totally crazy or insane ones, but they have some, of course, different sort of attacks and how to say, movements. One is actually not even a military thing. It's like an alpaca zombie, which grew up extremely. So there is this very huge alpaca zombie, which is a bit out of the ordinary, because the others are mostly like heavy machinery kind of things, like a
There is a
tank, a
Metal
big
Slug
airplane.
reference in there.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. One is like a mecha, like a big robot, and so on.
Yeah.
And then there is this huge zombie alpaca.
Yeah. So would have to address this at some point, but here seems to be as good a point as any. And that is probably the biggest omission that this game has, and that is multiplayer. As far as I can tell, this is a single player.
Yep, this is a good question because actually I started developing multiplayer. Actually, from the very beginning, the idea was to make it multiplayer, like a co-op, at least
Mhm.
local co-op. And I went through, I would say, like 50% of the multiplayer development. But when I started playing it multiplayer, just in the testing phase, so with some friends at home, and while we were testing it, we realized that the game is so fast that keeping two players on the same screen was just frustrating. It wasn't funny anymore. It was just you had to wait the other, or since especially at later stage when the game becomes way faster and more frenetic, having like two players was more frustrating than fun. I thought of also to develop it to having like a split screen, but then on the split screen, everyone was just exploring on their own, and then it wasn't anymore like a co-op,
Yeah.
except the boss fights. So I say, why change the nature of a game like this? And I prefer to focus on speed and optimizing the single player than the multiplayer. The only way for making it multiplayer would have been maybe with not non procedurally generated maps, and mostly like side scrolling, so left right, as Metal Slug or even
Right.
Contra.
Cupheads and so on. Then you know the, the players can proceed together. But when you have also a lot of vertical things and a lot of small room procedurally connected, then playing into on the same screen at this speed was just frustrating mostly. So
I mean,
yeah,
that's probably why Sonic the Hedgehog did multiplayer like it did.
Hmm.
yeah, maybe.
Like, anyway,
Until it
but
decided to do it the other way and everybody hated it.
right. um, but anyway, it is good that you recognized what a problem that was becoming and decided to axe it um, instead of persisting and potentially damaging the game overall with a
Yeah, rather than I mean, I really wanted it to be multiplayer, but the choice was either frustrating the players and keeping the game as it is, but creating a lot of frustration in multiplayer, or change totally the nature of the game. So I went to keep it just single player, but keeping also the original nature and idea of it.
Now, could there be a possibility of like later on down the line, depending on how well the game does, like some multiplayer challenge maps if the community wants something like that?
Yes, exactly. I thought about that, and then it would be by creating specific maps for the multiplayer,
Hmm.
and so they become some sort of arena or I don't know, but or
Arena
maybe
or
extra
even like a
levels
horde
or
mode
whatever.
seem something could be doable.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Or
It could be like simply a different mode, which is totally
Yeah,
a race
defend.
different
mode.
in the way that the
Yeah,
maps.
race mode, defend the pod, something like that.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
like
exactly, exactly.
Here
But
we
that,
something
go
of
that would
course,
again,
definitely.
adding
takes a lot
feature
of
creep.
resources.
Well, it's not really
No, I
feature
mean they
creep.
are all
Yeah,
great ideas, but of course they takes a lot of resources. You
right.
know, as a solo, mostly solo and low budget
Right.
thing. But of course, if the game sells well and then gives me more budget and resources, is something that I definitely consider. I like those
Mm.
ideas.
Right.
So basically,
I suppose
multiplayer
like
is not dead; it just needs to be wanted.
I'm like it's more
Yeah.
the expense has to be justified from the
Right.
sound of things. Like
Yeah,
I
exactly.
suppose it is worth asking how the game has been doing since it came out what a couple weeks ago.
Yes, exactly. It came out 21st of October. So, uh, yeah, not even 2 weeks. And these, well, I would say it's not going terribly, but it's not also going greatly. I think I can admit that it's going below expectation. But I also didn't know really what to expect. The wish lists were okay, not that high, but I think what was for me was a bit strange is that compared to other games I made, there was still kind of good online feedback. There were people playing it, there were reviews, there were articles, people on Twitch, people on YouTube. So there was a bit of noise about it. Nothing extreme, but still something compared to other games, and still it didn't sell that much. I don't know if it's just the wrong period. You know, the factors can be a lot, and as we say, that the market is overly saturated.
Right.
So
Yeah, we
sometimes
could.
could be just, for instance, the cover art is not so catchy, or I don't know what are the reasons.
Hmm.
I mean, it's not
I
going
mean,
badly, but it's a bit below expectation.
yeah, timing could be one of them since this is coming out right before Halloween. So
Not only that,
people
but this
might,
has been a relatively stuffed month for gaming.
yeah, it's like
Yeah,
there
like
are,
October is usually like very
yeah,
crowded month.
Yep.
yeah. So there are all sorts of reasons, probably a combination of factors.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
just, market's rough right now. And it's the unfortunate reality that there are going to be games that are going to sink beneath the waves.
Hmm.
Like, I suppose once again along those lines, do you develop just for PCs or do you put out games for
No,
consoles?
one fact is that which disappoints me a bit is that actually the release was multi-platform. And by the way, the
Uh,
game runs great on a Steam Deck, which is
mm-hmm.
yeah, it's just good to mention that. But yeah, no, the game came out also for PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Xbox Series, and Nintendo Switch. And by the way, I've done all the porting on my own. And so the game came out simultaneously in different platforms. And I was expecting, for instance, to uh, run good on Nintendo Switch or sells good on Nintendo Switch because I think it's kind of a right target. Is a game that runs great handheld, uh, but also there is a bit struggling. And of course, I have to mention that I self-published it, so I don't didn't have like huge resources to invest in marketing or PR
Right.
and whatnot. So there was a bit of noise, as I said earlier, but nothing, too extreme. And yeah, also on consoles, it went below expectation. Uh,
Mm,
but I don't know. I hope that it might pick it up at some point, or because I think the game is good. I mean, it's not like a masterpiece. It's not that game that you give a 10 out of 10, but it's smooth, it plays well, it's fast, it's funny, and it has a very competitive price. So I think it can definitely entertain you for a few hours and at very good price. So I hope that at some point, or it might have like a long tail, selling not a lot at the beginning, but steadily, few copies here and there, but for
the long
hopefully
tail.
a few years. Yeah.
Like, yeah, that is unfortunate, but also not that surprising to at least my ears because, well, first of all, even console gaming is very saturated at this point. Even the Nintendo Switch and how do I put this? You know, a indie game going completely multi-platform will get less attention than something that picks a platform potentially. Um, that is to say, usually if a platform maker is interested in highlighting an indie game, they'll usually highlight it that it's coming out for their platform. But there's much more involved in that conversation as well. Like so,
Yeah, of
uh,
course, it's always a bit of a gambling, and if I made it
yep,
only for Nintendo Switch, then it was coming out only on Nintendo Switch. Most probably, I could have had more coverage for Nintendo Switch, but then I
yeah,
was risking that if it wasn't going well, then if only one platform at the same time is too risky. What could have done maybe was to release it on Steam initially, and based on that, consider the consoles version, which is what probably most of the very indie developer do, to just test it first on Steam and then.
like
But yeah, you never know. I mean, everything is so
well,
unpredictable that.
true, but on that path, we can actually speak just based on the people we talk to and all that. But the most common pathway is usually like PC Steam, and Nintendo Switch. It's like if there's any console that's given secondary consideration on the indie market, it's the PlayStation and Xbox ecosystems. Um,
Yeah,
but
but the interesting fact is that my previous self-published game, which is Clunky Hero, did
uh,
great on Xbox. I don't know why. And actually, Speedolama is not doing great, but is actually the platform where it sold most is again Xbox. I don't know if because my previous game went well there, so the players that they are like returning players to my games
possibly.
because they like that one. But it's surprising that even that, which is Clanky Hero, this funny platformer Metroidvania, uh, did actually very well on Xbox. I think it's even most
Uh,
probably the
yeah,
best-selling platform for that game. Which was totally surprising. Again, I thought that Nintendo Switch was the uh,
yep.
right platform for that sort of game, but then just by a little. Okay, it's not that Xbox sold 10 times more than Switch, but
Right.
a bit more than Switch, and still surprised me in a way.
Indeed. Well, once again, like pathways are not a one size fits all category. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your perspective. Um, anyway, so I suppose I should close things out by asking what's next for you, if you can talk about future projects.
Hey, I have one project now, which I can't tell for two reasons. One reason is that I am still signing a deal with a band. Actually, it will be a game inspired by a music band universe. So it becoming the official music video of this band. I cannot say the band because we are in the process of signing it, the contract, but it's taking way more than expected. The you know the band is super fine with it, but the label, lawyers, and stuff like that, it's taking forever. I hope to
We got to get
announce
the
it in.
lawyers handled first before anything else.
Yeah, yeah. So I hope to announce it in December, in early December, this new project. But uh, at this point, I'm not sure anymore because I put it in standby, waiting for the signature. And also, I mean, developing wise, because to announce it, I want to have some material to show. But since now things got delayed, I don't have enough material.
Yeah, and it would
So
suck to put the effort into starting it and then they end up not signing it and all of it has to be trashed.
yeah, exactly. So I have a bit. I have some elements because I show the band, how it's gonna be. But then I
The
put
proof
in
of concept
standby.
stuff, yeah.
Yeah, I waited, of course, to have the signature. So now that is in standby, and I'm not sure when. I think that at the end of the day it will happen, but I'm not sure anymore when. So most probably I won't announce it early December, but sometimes in 2025. And then I have a few other ideas that, yeah, nothing concrete for now.
Okay. Well, I've run through my gamut of questions. Does anyone have anything further?
I think I'm good.
Yeah, I think I piped up when I had something.
Okay. Well, Chaosmonger, I want to thank you for taking time out of your vacation schedule and being with us here today to talk about your games. Um, Hopefully, Speedolama will pick up in the sales. And on that note, the game is Speedolama. It's currently available on all major platforms, going for $8.99. And also, there is, at least on Steam, a demo so you can try before you buy. Be sure to go and look at that and purchase this game today. All right, so that'll about do it for this installment of Fragments of Silicon. Be sure to tune in next time for our Sunday review stream. And until then, I shall wish you good gaming.